Okay, friends, if you will take your seats, we'll get started here. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the American Friends Service Committee. And we have worked closely with the Peace Pagoda in organizing these events. And I think, I'll just say, we had John and Carrie Schuchart on Tuesday night at First Congregational Church in Amherst, and it was an incredible night, just incredible. And you can say maybe a word about the walks that have been going on. I'll just share one quick thing. This morning we went for an interview on Democracy Now! We went down to Channel 22 facilities in Chicopee. So there's a 90% chance tomorrow, if you watch Democracy Now!, you will see Ms. Nakamura and Chieko do an interview on Democracy Now!
What time?
It's 8 to 9 usually in the morning on WMUA and is it WJOX? What's the Valley Free Radio? Valley Free Radio is in the afternoon at 4:30. 4? Is it 4? Okay. Anyway, it's in the afternoon on Valley Free Radio. But if you watch it on on Channel 15 in Northampton, you'll get to see the pictures. If you listen to WMUA, you just get to hear the sound. So that was really fun. And while we were there, I said to the guy who was setting up for the Democracy Now!, I said, Ms. Nakamura is a survivor. Of the Hiroshima bombing. Oh, he said, we should get her on the news tonight. So there was a second interview with a newscast, a news reporter. So Channel 22 had her on tonight between 5 and 6:30. So we tried to TiVo that. So somewhere we hope there's a copy of that we'll get to see when we get home. Okay, do you want to, Sister Claire, want to say a word?
Thank you very much, Doug. Yeah, it's been very, very moving and inspiring to work with you and AFSC for the 62nd anniversary of the U.S. bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Thank you very much. And thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. Doug, if you pardon the pun, looked hard for a place to where we could come together, but where we could also float the lanterns, which has become quite a ritual or a kind of ceremony that has a lot of meaning for people. So the regular Smith Pond was being dredged right now, so he found this beautiful spot. So thank you. And very simply, I just want to piggyback on the welcome that Doug already expressed. First and foremost to our cherished guest from Japan, Ms. Nakamura, and also Mr. Bao Tingle, who works at the National AFSC on demilitarization and building peace globally. So a really reverent welcome to both of you, and a very warm welcome to all the community here. And we know that what we experience tonight will ripple through us into all our families and friends and communities, and we know that we need this time to come together and get in touch with the meaning and significance of this day, and to kind of clear our sight and open our heart to what we can do. So without further ado, thank you again very much.
I'd like to just call your attention to the materials on the table. Be sure to take a look at those. There is a piece that gives Ms. Nakamura's story, so you will get it verbally, and you can also take it and read it at home as well. So what we'll do tonight, Bob Tingle will introduce, maybe say a few words himself. We'll introduce Ms. Nakamura. She will speak. And then at the end of that, we have a little presentation for her. And then we will walk together down to Willow Lake. And it takes just about 8 to 10 minutes to walk down there, where we'll do the floating lantern ceremony. So let me introduce Paul Tingle. As Sister Claire said, he's at National AFSC in Philadelphia, works in the peace building and demilitarization program there. And I'll let him introduce Ms. Nakamura and say a few words about his own work.
Good evening, everyone. I am very glad about our event tonight. Comparing it to what we have had so far since August 6th in our event in Philadelphia and the event that we had in Pittsburgh, this is the largest turnout of people in the commemoration of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So that really speaks into the kind of organizing that went, with all the work leading to such culmination, and I am very happy about that. The Peace Building and Demilitarization Program sponsored a public education project, which we are doing now, and it has 2 phases. The first phase of the what we call the Widening War Tour is actually for people to learn more about the evils of nuclear weapons. And what a better way to present the urgency of this issue than through a very, very effective and useful way of commemorating what happened 62 years ago in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Because it is August, and probably this was the reason why in Philadelphia we have probably like 30 people who came to our forum and probably around 40 people in Pittsburgh. Organizing an event in August is pretty challenging. We know what August means to a lot of people. It's vacation time and so on and so forth. However, there's no other date by which we can commemorate the events in Japan than in August. And so my program tried to seek so many AFSC programs all over the country, but what worked out was Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and here in Massachusetts. The second part of this Widening War Tour will be happening in the West Coast in September, and it will focus on the military bases issue. There is a great linkage between the issue of nuclear weapons and military bases. They are very costly. And from the way I look at things, the knee-jerk reaction of the militarist forces in the US and probably throughout the world when a conflict arises is to use military option. And one reason for that is because they have material advantages to conduct war, like having so many military bases or having nuclear weapons on top of the light and small arms that they manufacture. And in the current balance of weapons situation in the world, I think the US is pretty much the dominant force. And that's why when we look at what's happening, when there are conflicts, either regional and other international situations, the first action is not of diplomatic political solution, but military action. And that military action doesn't necessarily lead to war simply because the other side yields to the overwhelming force that the US can present. But it is not always that case. There will be resistance. That was the understatement when the Iraq invasion happened. That it will be mission accomplished. And the mission is far from being accomplished. It's getting more complicated. It's getting more costly. It is taking a lot of lives of people. It is creating hatred and enmity throughout the world because of the unilateral preemptive strike doctrine that the US has developed into itself as a justification for the military action it's doing in different parts of the world. So the essence of this widening war tour is basically for us to understand what are the issues and why we need to work for peace. We really need to work for peace because anything that is done out of hatred, any production of weapons for quote-unquote even defensive use will turn out to be used in an offensive sense. It will come back to us. And I think that's one of the lessons regarding Hiroshima and Nagasaki. A civilian target, cities of hundreds of thousands, unarmed citizens who were already at the brink of ending the war, became a legitimate target for a military action. We should be careful of actions like that because at some point it will come back to us. Imagine those who took the wrong lessons out of Hiroshima and Nagasaki by thinking that the US civilians will become a legitimate target for their horrific intentions. The same thing should come into our present thinking about these weapon sales that we are giving to Saudi Arabia and other countries that we call moderates. Because even if things are given to friends, it will end up in the hands of enemies. Remember, Saddam was an ally against Iran. Remember that the Taliban were an ally against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. But what happens? And so if you're going to give weapons, and if you're going to initiate wars, these are negative things that's happening. I just want to end my presentation by saying that there are, as Doug pointed out, many materials on the table that will be very useful. I probably should also mention that what we are doing now is actually a continuation of what have been happening these past several years through the AFSC project called Eyes Wide Open, where we exhibit the booths just to dramatize what is the human cost of war for American soldiers. And then we sort of expanded it by also including the civilian issues to represent the Iraqi casualties. Because in this war, by far, the Iraqis are bearing the brunt of the war. And they will be paying for it more even if the war is ended, by building up whatever infrastructure that was destroyed. It will take a lot of money, it will take a lot of time, it will take a lot of effort. So war, in the human sense, is costly. This material, which we developed recently, shows what is the financial cost of war. It's just staggering. While it's estimated right now that the cost of war in Iraq amounted to more than $750 billion, that is by far a very conservative estimate. Because an economic professor who also won a Nobel Prize a few years ago, Joseph Stiglitz, actually estimated that at this point the cost of the war in Iraq is $2 trillion. That is 2 followed by 12 zeros. That is how much the Second World War cost for the United States for this 2003 to the present war in Iraq. A day, a war in Iraq cost $720 million. And when that tragedy happened in Minneapolis, that the bridge collapsed because so-called structural deficiency, and then they made a study that all the infrastructures here in the US on bridges is basically very, very scary. Things could be improved if there is only that intention, if resources are just used the right way. Looking at this amount of $720, for instance, I just want to shorten this because I want to introduce Ms. Nakamura. For instance, that $720 million would translate, for instance, into $34,904 4-year scholarship for university students. I'm just looking at this figure because this is important. For 1-day war in Iraq, you can give $34,904 scholarship for students who will go to college, study, come out as professionals, create a lot of job possibilities, all the kind of things. If you just imagine, expand your imagination, we will be creating a lot of jobs here that will alleviate whatever economic reasons for war and so on and so forth. But this is not being seen at the moment. And there are more figures here about housing and so on and so forth. Please take a look at this resource, because this will just amplify what it costs financially to wage a war. The third aspect that I would like to point out about the cost of the war is that what it's doing as far as American values is concerned. One of the perils of war militarism is that democracy dies in the country. Because everybody becomes a suspect of being supportive of the enemy or coming out with action that will be that will disturb the military effort. There are spying, there are all these emergency laws. The presidential decrees right now have been signed, scores of them between the months of May and July, that further empowers the president to a point that legitimate peace organizations can become target of their assets being frozen simply because they'll be suspected of supporting so-called insurgents in Iraq. Democracy is at a loss at this point. That is another cost that we have to look at. And 2 days ago, we just heard about the wiretapping thing, that they want it intensified. Can you imagine? How can you imagine democracy in America when everybody is being watched over by Big Brother? That's the cost. The final cost, I would say, is the spiritual cost. The spiritual thing doesn't factor into the data that we produce. We can quantify the cost of war in terms of body count or in terms of financial. But I think what is the most powerful way to deepen our conviction on why we should oppose all wars, oppose violence, oppose weapons of mass destructions is the spiritual aspect. What is happening to us as humans? Is this the way we should be leading our life? That we have to destroy everybody or one another? There are some purposes for us. And all religions have basically converged to the same point that we have better purposes than what we're doing. What Yuko Nakamura will present tonight, I guess, will amplify the spiritual dimension of the cost of the bombing and the cost of continuing wars and violence. What it is doing to us as humans. We have to listen to what she says. And from listening, let us strengthen our conviction of what we can do to make, peace and to make sure that love prevails. She was a 13-year-old high school student in Japan, in Hiroshima, when the bombing happened. The students at the time of the war were drafted to do some work with the armaments, production of armaments, including the planes. And that was where she was at the time of the bombing. If you look into cause and effects, sometimes I have difficulty understanding that. The only reason she was not at the school was because she was working in the factory. The school was right there at ground zero in Hiroshima. So many students, her friends, her classmates died, but she was outside. Nevertheless, the bombing was so strong, the factory was affected, but she survived. She survived to tell us a very important story that we should listen to, and we have to put not only into our heads, but into our heart. Miss Yuko Nakamura.
皆様こんばんは。中村です。今バルさんがほとんど紹介していただきましたけど、今日 今日は皆様とお会いできて本当に嬉しく思っております。
Good evening, everyone. I'm Yuko Nakamura, and now Mr. Bao has told you much about me already, but it is my pleasure to meet you all.
バルさんがご紹介してくださいましたように、私はその時13歳で女学校の2年生でした。
As Bao said to you, when it happened, I was 13 years old in the second year in the all-girls school.
でその頃は本当に戦争で工場でも働く人たちがみんな戦争に行ってしまって人手が足りなくて、子どもたち私たちもハイスクールの2年生でしたけど工場の方に行くことになりました。そして8月の6日を迎えたわけです。
Back then, all the regular workers at factories were already drafted, so there was shortage of labor. So even the high school students, including myself, were forced into work in the factory, and that's where we were on August 6th.
広島の夏は本当に暑い日が続くんですね。でもその時は工場に行って働いていましたので、夏休みもなく毎日出かけていました。でちょうどその8月6日は電気が来ない日っていうんですか、電休日で工場がお休みになるっていうことで、先生が明日は工場がお休みだから今年は1回も泳いでないからみんな海水浴に行こうかっていうことで、その日は海水浴に行くことになりました。
Usually the summer in Hiroshima is very hot with a blazing sun, but it did not bother me. I went to the factory every day to work hard, but on that day the factory was closed to conserve electricity, and we had not been to a beach or anything for the whole summer, so the supervisor suggested that we all go to the beach.
みんなその年は泳げなかったので嬉しくって水着を持って工場に出かけました。そしてその日は朝から米軍の飛行機が飛んできて空襲警報、警戒警報が連続して出されていました。それで工場の中でしばらく待機することになりました。
That was our first chance to swim that summer, so we were very excited and we brought out our own bathing suits. But then the American airplanes were flying overhead, and there has been a succession of the attack alert and air raid warnings, so we were told to wait for a while in the factory.
で私はその時本を読んでいたんですけれど、友達が「B29が飛んできた」「落下傘のようなものを落とした」って言った瞬間にバッとそこがもうすっごい光でもうびっくりして私は広島の方をパッと見たわけです。その時
So I was just in the factory reading a book when a friend of mine shouted that, look, there's an American airplane dropping something that looks like a parachute. So I looked over and I saw an incredible flash and a blast, and we all looked toward the city of Hiroshima.
ピカーッと光ったで、私はそちらを見た瞬間にすごい爆風で窓ガラスから土壁から木の柱もう全部が吹き飛んできて工場が一瞬にして倒れてしまいました。私もあちらの方にその爆風で吹き飛ばされました。
The moment I looked, there was in addition to the great flash, there was a great blast of wind that brought the window glasses and the part of the wall. The entire factory collapsed in a second.
この工場が狙われて爆弾が落とされたと瞬間思いました。で私はそこに突っ伏していましたけれど、とにかく次の爆弾が落ちた時に私たちは殺されると瞬間思って、そこからどうしても逃げ出そうとはって戸口の方に出ました。
So we thought that this factory had been a target, and the next one, when the next bomb hits, then we'll surely be killed. So for a while we were crouched down with our face covered, but then we decided to escape no matter what it took, and we started to crawl toward the door.
私はその時ガラスの破片がもう体中に突き刺さって、あちらこちらから血が出て、もう鼻血は出るしで、もう血だらけの状態で、とにかくやっと工場から這い出して外に出て、裏山の防空壕に逃げました。
My whole body was stabbed by many bits of glass, and I had a bloody nose. But I managed to get out of the factory and went toward the shelter in the mountains.
その時見上げた空が今までの真っ青でもう美しかった空にもうネズミ色のもくもくとした雲がもうどんどんそれこそ悪魔の手のように広がって私たちに襲いかかるように見えました。
When I went outside, I looked up at the sky, which was beautiful blue sky until a moment ago was now covered with thick gray smoke and cloud that reached over at us as if it was a big monster's hand.
私たちは何事が起こったのかさっぱりわからないまま、もうとにかく何か異常な事態が起こったなっていうことで、ようやく裏山の防空壕に逃げて、そこにしばらく入ってました。
We had no idea exactly what was going on, but we knew that it was a drastic emergency. So we finally reached the bomb shelter in the mountains in the back of the factory, and that's where we stayed for a while.
しばらくしても次の爆弾は何もしてくるような様子もなかったので、私は外に出て体中についた血を手ぬぐいを濡らして拭いていました。その時空から大粒の何かが真っ黒なものが落ちてきたわけです。
After a while, we figured that there was no second bomb. So I went outside and using a piece of cloth tried to wipe off the blood of my body when something black and sticky fell from the sky.
それが後では黒い雨って言われているんですけど、その時は雨のようには見えなくて、上から何かドロッとしたようなガソリンのような何とも言えない黒い、ちょうどこの指の先ぐらいのものがボタボタっていう感じで落ちてきて、みんなはまたアメリカの飛行機が戻ってきてガソリンをまいた、私たちはみんな殺されるっていうふうに叫んで、また防空壕の中に逃げました。
That was what was later called the black rain, but it did not feel like rain, but it felt as if it was the dollops of gasoline. It was thick and black, and each drop was as big as the tip of your finger. And so we thought the American airplanes were back to drop gasolines on us, so we ran back to the shelter.
私たちは本当に何が起こったかさっぱりわからないまま、そこの防空壕の中にずっと隠れていました。で、私たちはそのようにして、私は約 2.8 キロって言って、2.8 キロのところで被爆しましたので、しかも工場の中にいたのでやけどはしませんでして、そういうガラスの破片の怪我だけで済みました。しかし私の1年下のその当時12歳のハイスクールの1年生の子どもたちは600メートルぐらいの地点で作業中に全員が被爆して亡くなりました。
So we stayed in the bomb shelter for a long time with absolutely no idea what was going on. Now I was about 2.8 kilometers, which is a little over 1.5 miles away from the bomb center, and I was within the factory, so I could survive that way. But the students who are 1 year junior of us, the 12-year-olds, were all died about 600 meters away from the bomb center, which is a little over 600 yards, 700 yards.
爆心地に近いところで被爆した人たちは本当に一瞬にして全身に大やけど、そしてもうすぐその場で亡くなった人がほとんどですけど、そこを逃げ延びた人たちも、もう皮が全部むけて、皮膚が全部むけて、真っ赤な血がにじんだ体、そして膨れ上がった体、そして眼球は飛び出し、内臓も破れ、髪はボーボーになって、むけた皮膚が手から垂れ下がる状況で、それでようやく少しは逃げ延びても、ほとんどが途中で倒れて死んでいきました。
Most people who were near the bomb center were killed instantly, burned to death. But those few who escaped were walking, trying to escape, burned, their bodies burned and their skins hanging off, all bloody, and their eyeballs and organs sticking out of the body. They all tried to walk away from the place, but pretty soon they all died.
でコンクリートの建物の中にいた人たちは放射線を浴びてましたけど、熱線を浴びていなかったのでやけどもなく無傷の状態の人もいたわけですね。で、よかった、助かった、よかったっていうことで、ようやく逃げ延びてもしばらくすると髪の毛が抜けたり、皮膚に赤い斑点や紫の斑点が出て、で血を吐いて真っ赤な下痢をして、そうして次々に死んでいきました。助かったと思った人たちも放射線による影響で本当にたくさんの人たちが命を落としていったわけです。
There were people who were within the concrete buildings when the bomb was dropped, and those people escaped the heat, although they were hit by the radiation. So for a while they were happy, glad to have escaped the instant death. But later on, soon their hair fell off and they had red and purple spots on their skins. They had bloody diarrhea and vomiting, and many people died that way.
で、その時広島にいない人たち、まだとっても元気な人たちが、広島が大変だからみんなで助けに行こう、救援に行こうということで、たくさんの人たちが広島に来ました。その人たちは元気な人たちだったんですけれど、1週間ぐらいそこでいろんな作業をしていて、帰った人たちがやはり同じように髪の毛が抜けたり、赤い斑点が出たりして、原爆に直接会った人たちと同じような症状が現れて、次々に死んでいきました。
Soon, once people heard the news, large groups of rescue teams were organized and sent to Hiroshima. But those volunteers, after working in Hiroshima city for about a week, and once they got home, they had the same symptoms as the atomic victims, including the hair falling out and the red and purple spots. And many people who did not directly, who were not directly attacked by the bombs, also died the same way.
普通の爆弾と違って、やはり原爆っていうのはその含まれる放射線の影響っていうのが本当に怖いから、これだけは他の爆弾とは違うということで、その年の12月までに広島では14万人、長崎では7万人の人たちが次々に原爆症の症状が現れて死んでいきました。ですから直接その場で亡くなった人も合わせて本当に多くの人たちが命を落としていきました。そして5年ぐらいの間に 約その倍ぐらいの人たちが何ともわからない病気で次々に亡くなっていきました。
The atomic bomb is not like regular bombs. The effect of radiation can never be underestimated. So soon afterwards, the atomic bombs killed 140,000 people in Hiroshima and 70,000 people in Nagasaki. But within 5 years afterwards, almost the people almost doubled that size have died with the similar symptoms and unexplainable illnesses.
で私も、ガラスの怪我とかいろんなことはありましたけど、無事にその場を離れて命は助かりましたけれど、その後だいたい40歳ぐらいまでは体が弱くて、夏になるととっても耐えきれないぐらい体がだるく、何もしたくなくて寝転んでることが多かったんです。そして冬になるとちょっと寒いなと思ったらもう風邪をひいて熱が出て寝込むことが多く、30歳の時に大きな手術を2回しました。で本当に私だけがこんなに体が弱いのかなと思っていましたら、やはりそういう状況で多くの人たちが放射線の影響によって体が弱っていったわけです。でそれを原爆ブラブラ病っていうことで言われているってことは後になって私は知りました。
So I received many cuts in my body from the glass, but I survived and without any other injury. But this experience with the bomb gave me a very weak constitution. Up until I was about 40 years old, every winter I would catch cold and have a fever, and I could not get out of bed. Every summer the heat will get me so badly that I had such strong fatigue that I was not able to do anything. When I was about 30 years old, I had to go through 2 major surgeries. And later on, I found out that there are many, many others who suffered from the similar symptoms. And it had this, even the specific name of atomic bomb, hanging out disease, the disease that prevented you from working hard or running around, just the long-lasting, lingering effects of the bomb.
たった一発の原子爆弾でどんなに多くの人たちが命を落とし、そして都市は破壊されていくかということ、本当に実際にあったものでないとこれは理解できないことだと思うんですけれど、その時落とされた広島長崎の原爆っていうのは今の原爆に比べると本当に小さな力のないものだと思います。今はもうその何十倍もの威力を持った原爆が作られていると思っております。
One bomb killed so many people and destroyed so much of cities and the lives. And yet I understand that the atomic bombs that we have now are many, many times more powerful than those ones that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
私たち生き延びた被爆者たちはやはりその悲惨な状況っていうのを目の当たりに知っていますので、これを本当に世界の方々に理解していただき、再び私たちの同じような被爆者を作ってはならないということで被爆者運動をずっと続けてまいりました。でもう本当に被爆者も私も13で被爆いたしましたけど、それから62年が経って今75歳になりました。で私も自分ではもう年取ったなと思うんですけれど、被爆者の中ではまだ若いと言われています。そのようにみんなが年取ってこれから本当の被爆の状況っていうものを話せる人たちも次第に少なくなってくると思うんですね。だからこれからも命の続く限りはそのために頑張っていきたいっていうふうに思っております。
I, as an atomic bomb survivor, experienced all this firsthand. and when I was 13. Now 62 years later, I am 75. I am not young, and yet among the atomic bomb survivors, I am rather young. So I consider it my mission to let the rest of the world know what it was like, and this I intend to continue working on it for the rest of my life.
私がこの運動に入った本当に集中して入ったというのは20年余り前になりますけれど、20年ぐらい前です。それまでも被爆者運動には少しずつは関わっておりましたけれど、ちょうど20年ぐらい前に一つのアニメが制作されました。でそれは先ほどお話ししましたように、私の1年下の学年の子どもたちが全員亡くなりましたけど、彼女たちの残された日記をもとにして日本の NHK が制作したビデオでアニメなんですけれど、それが8月6日に放送されるっていうことで、私はその時テレビの前で放送されるのをじっと待っていました。
I have been seriously involved in this anti-nuclear movement for about 20 years. Before then, I had a sporadic involvement, but about 20 years ago, the government-run television called NHK in Japan produced this animation program. The story was based on the journals and diaries of the students who were a year younger than me in the same school, who all died because of the bomb.
そのアニメを見た時に最初に出てきた写真、それが私の本当によく知っている1年下の森脇陽子という人でした。で彼女は本当に可愛い目の大きな可愛い子でしたけれど、森脇陽子さんの写真がパッと出てきた時、私は本当に何とも言えない背筋がずっとするような感じがしました。彼女は本当に12歳のまんまの姿でそこに現れてきたわけです。
When I saw the program, the first picture that they showed was a photograph of a girl named Yoko Moriwaki, who was my friend, the student who was 1 year junior of me. She was a very pretty girl, and when I saw her picture, just 12 years old, then I felt the chill run down my spine.
それを見た瞬間に本当に12歳で何の罪もない子どもたちが戦争のためとはいえそこで命を断ち切られてしまった無念さっていうんですか、それを思うと彼女たちのその気持ちをこれからも私たちは変わって多くの人たちに知っていただかなければならないなっていうことでこの運動に入ることを決心したわけです。でそれから私は一生懸命多くの人たちに再び被爆者を作ってはならない、しかも子どもたちの上に原爆を落としてはならないっていうことでこの運動に力を入れてまいりました。
This girl was only 12 years old, completely innocent, but she was sacrificed because of the war. How would she have felt to have to end her life so unreasonably at that point? And it occurred to me that it was my job to let the rest of the world know how she must have felt. And that is when I started to seriously commit myself to this anti-nuclear movement. And I started to seek out speaking occasions so that the more and more people will agree with me that we should not create any more hibakusha, the atomic bomb victims, and we should never drop atomic bombs on children.
最後に私も一言言いたいんですけれど、広島の原爆の詩人で原爆症で亡くなった峠さん吉の詩を私が英語でちょっと読ませていただきます。
To conclude this speech, I would like to read to you a poem written by a poet and atomic bomb victim. His name was Sankichi Toge, and I am going to read this poem to you in English.
Give me back my father. Give me back my mother. Give me back my grandfather. Give me back my grandmother. Give me back my children. Give me back my self. Give me back my people. Give me back. Give me back.
Now Ms. Nakamura would like to receive questions or comments.
I want to know from her how it happened that there was an accident in July in the south of Japan where 551 tanks leaked into the Pacific Ocean. I want to know what they are doing in order to prevent that kind of tragedy. We don't have very much longer to live if it goes on. Also, I want to remind her that the whales would not leave Boston Harbor because they didn't want to be burned in the mess that came from their southern city. Now, they went through it. How can they continue to manufacture the same thing that killed the people I saw and that I worked with for 2.5 years in Japan?
Sorry, you said whales.
I was in Hiroshima for 2.5 years, erasing the psychosomatic effects of radiation burns.
Hold on, please. まず最初の質問は、その前の柏崎の原発が地震で上を地震が高く壊れるとかなんとか、そういうことにしてる日本はどういう想定をするのかみたいな。I'm translating to her your first question about Kashiwazaki, the nuclear plant.
Oh, I am a member of the Hippocrates.
She's saying, where did you suffer from that?
Huh?
Where did you suffer? Where did you receive your suffering from the radiation?
Japanese people. I worked with them for 2.5 years here.
Oh,
広島で被爆なさったんですか？
I worked with Ataki-san. We made pictures. I have shown them all over the world.
柏崎原発は本当にああいうところに原発が作られたっていうことは私たちも本当に知らなかったんですけど、とにかく今原発を作るということについては日本ではそこの土地の人たちはみんな反対してますけれど、私はちょっとあそこの柏崎原発が再び稼働できるかどうかっていうのはちょっと疑問に思っております。だけど地元の人たちにとっては本当に心配なことですし、私たちも本当に原発もなければ一番いいなっていうふうには思ってますけど、今作られた原発をどうしていくかっていうのは大きな問題だと思います。で、私はもう日本中の屋根の上にソーラーをつけて太陽のおかげで電気ができるようにならないかなとか、原発に代わるものが何かないかっていうことは常々考えておりますけれど、そういうことを考えてくれる科学者がいてくれて、 原子力を使わなくてもいいようになってほしいなっていうふうに思ってます。で地元ではみんなやはり反対しているんですけれど、今できたものをどうするかっていうのは本当に難しい問題だと思っております。
About the Kashiwazaki, the nuclear plant, I was not even aware of that nuclear plant until the earthquake hit it. But there are many nuclear plants in Japan, and there seems to be a pattern that the government keeps building them, even though the local population are always opposed to it. I wish there was no such thing as a nuclear plant, and I wish that our entire sky was covered with solar panels. And I'm hoping that the scientific improvement will enable us. Please make, we receive questions or comments about her, Miss Nakamura's experience.
Yes, I'm wondering what the spiritual toll has been among survivors of this holocaust.
心の問題っていうのはそれこそ個人個人ですごく違いますのでね、その被爆者の中でそういう心の問題っていうものについてはちょっと難しい私は。
What she said so far was that the spiritual thing is so personal, so it is not something that is aggressively discussed among the atomic bomb survivors.
魂の問題というより放射能に対するやっぱり恐怖っていうことでそれが自分の心の中にすごく残って子どもたちに対する遺伝の問題なんかがすごく影響してるっていうのはよく聞きますけど、宗教っていうのは私はあんまりそれぞれの問題ですのでよく分かりませんけど、心の傷として残るっていうことはあるんですね。
There has been fear in my heart for the radiation, and also the health of my children and other atomic bomb victims' children. So this fear has been a scar, spirit in our spirits. But we usually, but I don't have a particular comment in a religious sense.
Just one more, please. Thank you so much for all your work in the peace movement in Japan. You're really an inspiration to us here, and I'm hoping that you can say a little something about recent successes in the Japanese peace movement, what you've been doing, what you are particularly proud of recently, and what challenges the peace movement in Japan is facing now.
Yeah. やっぱり戦争が終わって長いこと経っておりまして、やはり平和に対する問題ももう当たり前のことのように思ってる人も多くなってきてます。平和がありがたいことだっていうことがもうそれが本当に実感として持てなくなっている人もいるんではないかと思いますけれど、今日も平和行進で歩いていらっしゃいましたけど、日本でも8月6日の広島に向けて3ヶ月ぐらいずっと引き継いで毎日何百人の人たちが平和行進っていうのを行っております。で、私たちも神奈川で13日間ずっと被爆者が先頭に立って次々と引き継ぎながら道行く人たちに平和を訴えながらやっております。それから原爆展もしょっちゅうやっておりますし、 いろんな意味で多くの人たちに理解してもらえるように、そして戦争にならないように、そして子どもたちを再び犠牲者にしないようにということで運動は続けております。
It has been a kind of a long time since the end of the war, so the people, Japanese people, have begun to take peace for granted. We tend to forget that peace is special and precious. So, but however, every year in August, hundreds of people march, just as people marched here. Hundreds of people march for peace. And in my hometown prefecture of Kanagawa, for 13 days we have organized a peace walk and also atomic bomb-related exhibits, so that many people, more and more people, will understand what the issue is, and we will all work for no more war.
で皆さんもよくお分かりかと思うんですけど、日本の憲法の中には憲法9条っていうのがありまして、戦争はしない、戦争は放棄する、もう武器も持たないっていうようなのが憲法で決められております。しかし今の内閣ではその憲法を変えたいっていうことになってますので、今あちらこちらで憲法を守る9条の会っていうのができておりますけれど、私どももノーモア被爆者9条の会っていうことで発足しておりまして、来年はその9条の会の集まりが日本で行われますので、そういうふうに多くの人たちが9条を守っていこうっていう運動も続けております。
In Japanese constitution, we have Article 9, which says that we'll denounce war and will not possess weapons. But now we have a cabinet, the government, which is for changing this Article 9. So the groups have formed across the country to fight against that trend, and I myself is part of this No More Hibakusha, the atomic bomb victim, Article 9 group, and we are organizing nationwide.
Night that the Veterans for Peace have sent draft legislation to all the Congress people asking that we insert an Article 9 in our own Constitution. You'll be hearing a lot more about this in the near future. Now, Carol, you want to come forward? We want to just to say thanks.
Oh.
Opportunity to express thanks on behalf of all of us for your generosity in coming to be with us. It's been a long trip, and we are so honored that you have chosen to be with us here in Northampton. We have a few gifts that are little remembrances of our local area in Northampton. A book of our history, historic Northampton, and I'm sorry, it's in English. So the short version is this refrigerator magnet. And we have a flag of Massachusetts. But the last thing that we have is a remembrance of the food that we've shared together. We've enjoyed eating together. And we have for you some maple syrup from our own region.
She just said that she loves maple syrup.
We have lots of photographs we want to take of all the good people who've been involved.
How about the translator? How about the translator? Good job.
Again, thank you so much.
Okay, we are so blessed to have her with us and to share this time. So many, many thanks. Okay, we're going to walk down to the lake and do our floating lantern. We're going to walk just straight out and to the sidewalk, and then you both turn left and walk down to the lake, and we'll come back and clean up afterwards. So please join us down at the lake. Friends, if you would like to sit on the building paper and geese, fertilize this for free, and we just didn't want you to be sitting in the fertilizer. So the pink building pieces we brought for if you'd like to sit, but feel free to stand as well. Everyone, we're passing out candles. I hope we have enough candles for everyone. We will. What we're going to. People are still arriving, so I'm just giving instructions here. Maybe I'll just wait just a moment until other people arrive, and then I'll give you instructions about how we're going to do this ceremony. Okay, friends, thank you all for coming. We are going to start this now. Let me just tell you what we're going to do. We're first. Can't hear you. Oh, you're on this right. Is that better? Can you hear both better there? Okay. We're going to first of all have Mary Ellen Miller share a little bit about the Obon ceremony in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where they float the candles. So we get a little bit of a background about what this ceremony is about. And then after that, I'll ask 8 people to help us light the candles in the lanterns. And then I need those people to help me get the lanterns into the lake. This needs to be a nicely coordinated event. And while the lanterns are being lit and we're getting them in the lake, we'd like you to light your candles. And if you start your candles and share the light around, then we'd like all of you to have your candles lit. So then the candles will be pulled out across the lake, and when they disappear behind the island, then feel free to blow your own candle out as you are ready to do so. This is usually a very reflective ceremony and usually ends in quiet, not necessarily silence, but it should be a quiet ending. Mary Ellen, can I ask you to share a bit? Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay. This time of year in Japan in mid-August is the festival called Obon, and it's the time when the people welcome the ancestors back. So it's this very wonderful, joyful time where they welcome the ancestors back in dances. There's these wonderful parades where they put on fancy costumes. There's a special kind of dancing, Obon dancing, that different neighborhoods and parts of the cities do. And also there is the floating lantern part of this tradition. It lasts for a whole week. They actually get 3 days of work off. So it's the whole country kind of closes down for 3 days to celebrate, to welcome the ancestors back. And they float the lanterns to represent, at the end of the week when they send the ancestors back, they send them on the lighted lanterns to send them back to the other shore or to the other side. The welcoming happens with dancing and all kinds of visits to the grave sites. And this also took on a special meaning in Hiroshima. If you go to Hiroshima or Nagasaki for the Ide-sai, the annual commemorative ceremonies that they do in both those cities in the evening, lanterns are floated on the rivers, and the names of the people who have died in those bombings or the people who have since died as a result of radiation sickness that, as Mrs. Nakamura told us, afflicts people for the rest of their lives. They write the name of the person on the lantern and then float that down the river. And tonight our lanterns are being floated with wishes of hope, joy, peace, and love.